Hello and welcome to Shape Live. I'm Mark Andrews and I'm thrilled to be returning to Shape to be hosting today's discussion. As those of you who have attended a Shape event before, you'll know that Shape Education is a movement that we established just over 2 years ago. And it's a collaborative effort that was established between the Cambridge University Press and Assessment and the Cambridge Judge Business School. And it has this goal of bringing people together to discuss, to debate, and to enact change within education. And with these Shape Live events, it's an opportunity for us to think through and discuss some of the topical and current issues and opportunities that are currently facing education. So today, we're going to be returning our attention to how, as educators and indeed education systems, we prepare our students to thrive in this future world. What are those skills, what are those knowledge, those mindsets and affordances that our learners will need to help them to thrive in the future, and to thrive in a future where we're going to be looking to them to solve many of these wicked problems that the globe faces. So to help us explore this, I'm delighted to be joined by our panel of global change makers and innovators, people who are actively thinking and working in the area of educational development. And so we have Jose Otero, who is an adjunct instructor at New York University. He's an education policy advisor and VP of 5G Americas that is delivering 5G communications across Latin America and the Caribbean. We're also joined by Letitia Seglah, who's the founder and CEO of Build, Scale and Grow. And she's working with startups to develop meaningful growth. She also leads Lively Tuition. That's an organization that provides personalized tuition to young people and is also an independent advisor to the European Commission. And then last but not least, we have Katuta Lumpa, who's the IT service delivery manager for Airbus and is also part of Airbus's Africa community and is currently leading a voluntary initiative to establish a mentorship program at a school in his hometown. So I'd like to welcome you all to today's discussion. And we're going to be posing questions to our panelists today, but we'd also love to include observations and questions from you, our audience. So please do use your responses. Please do respond in the chat to the conversation as we go along. And some of these will be piped through to me to bring through and to ask our panelists. I'm going to aim to leave some time towards the end of the session where we can bring some of those questions and bring them to the panelists. And just to finish off our housekeeping, if you can't stay for the whole event, a recording will be available on the Shape Education website afterwards. And as always, we're going to be continuing our conversation at future Shape Live and Shape Education events and on LinkedIn. So let's start our discussion. So a common question that we ask, and we always ask, is what do you want to be when you grow up? And this was possibly quite a good question when we worked at a time when job roles and industries were quite static. But as we move through the fourth industrial revolution, the notion of a job role, work, and indeed the role of jobs in society is changing and evolving, which requires a shift in the way that we, both as educators and society, prepare young people for the future. And I've heard it said that the pandemic has given us a glimpse into the future. And that's where I'd like to start. So panel, if you could turn on your cameras, please, and we'll ask some questions. Fantastic, hello. So we're going to start really to ourselves here. And I'd like to ask what, from your perspective, how has the pandemic affected the way that you and those around you work? And perhaps Katuta, could I come to you first? How's it affected your work at Airbus?
Yeah, most of the time we were in the office. I was used to doing 9 to 5 in the office. Once a month or once every 2 months, I'll travel to Germany or France where my line managers are. So working from home has been different. It's sort of proof that we don't necessarily have to meet face to face all the time and travel. And we can just as easily have some meetings from home. So that's been quite interesting.
Oh, thank you. And Letitia, how about yourself?
For me, I've been working remotely almost full time since about 2018. So the organizations that I work with, they have, full remote mode. So for us, there wasn't much adaptation that was required. So I've been working with teams that I've never met in person before. But prior to that, working in a corporate setting, I did have to go to, work 3-4 times a week. And I had, colleagues obviously that you work with on a one-to-one basis, etc. But even so, we had colleagues, in a bank, for example, in an investment bank that we work with across various jurisdictions that, again, you don't regularly meet. So I do feel like some organizations were a little bit ahead of the curve because of, the various locations that they worked in. So I personally have been quite used to remote working for a number of years now.
Thank you. And Jose, how about yourself?
Well, first, thank you for the invitation. For me, it's kind of a little bit different. I've been working remotely since back in '97. So for my day job in my location, work from home, I didn't have any change. But however, I used to travel 2 weeks out of every single month. So now I'm doing all of those travel arrangement. I'm doing actually all those meetings remotely, and that have created a huge increase because before, if you travel to just one country, you are in that country that week, you are having meetings that week, you are delivering presentations that week. Now, since everybody's doing remotely, I'm doing presentation in Brazil in the morning, Costa Rica at noon, and in Dominican Republic in the afternoon, in the evening. So is my workload have triple, quadruple easily.
Yeah, so that idea of remote working, of kind of flexible working is definitely, I guess, hit you. And I think it's worth saying that it's kind of, Jose, I think you mentioned it's 5:30 in the morning at the moment or something. It's 5.
Well, no, now it's 6 a.m.
6 a.m. Sorry, where you are. So I think you're embodying that. And so in your roles and in your industries, what changes have you seen happen over the pandemic, and which of these changes particularly do you think will stay? So this idea of flexible working, essentially, I think managing your own time more, from what you're saying, Jose, is obviously a very important thing to make sure that you're getting that work-life balance between obviously attending meetings and working in different regions, and then also having some downtime as well. What other kind of changes have you seen, and do you think will persist? Come back to you there, Jose.
Yeah, well, there was a realization by my work is basically directly with government. So there was a realization by many government entities that many of the meetings that were having on a presidential basis, they could do it online and they will have a larger audience for that. So there was kind of over delivery of meetings. So suddenly everybody wanted to do conferences, everybody wanted to do public policy online. You have not only from the ministerial level or regulatory level, but you also have in legislature, all the Senate inviting all kind of expert to discuss every single point of legislation, which is very nice. But when you are looking into over 40 different countries, is overwhelming, and that basically tells you we don't have enough experts in the region to attend all the needs that we have when it relates to digital skills, when it relates to digital policy, or other issues like cybersecurity, etc.
Okay, so if I'm understanding right there, you're saying there's a shortage in digital skills and also in experts in kind of digital policy. Is that correct? Yeah.
Yeah, there's a huge pent-up demand in the region for that type of skills. On the other hand, if you want to look into the broad side of this situation, according to the Inter-American Development Bank, they will doing some research and surveys among all public policy officials, and they estimate that every single month of quarantine is equivalent to a year of learning and acknowledgement of the importance of digital uh, services and online services as a platform for government deliveries or like e-government.
Okay. Thanks, Jose. And Letitia, to you as well. I mean, what kind of gaps or what kind of things have you seen change? Have you observed during this time?
Yeah, some really interesting things that I've observed. I've always been quite concerned about the role that, having to be at work full-time every day has on people who are, not necessarily marginalized, but on mothers, for example, the role of childcare and things like having a childcare shortage, in the UK. And with a lot of the mothers that I know who, work full-time, this pandemic, the lockdown has actually enabled them to be more present at work because a lot of their childcare needs are taken care of by being at home. Another really interesting observation that I've made and that I've been reading up on is the impact on people who have, certain disabilities like, blindness or deafness, etc., and how actually working at home has meant that, the adaptations that they would normally ask for at work and are really difficult to get, they have a home office that is already set up according to their needs. And so things like, the normal resistance that they would get at work, they're not getting that. And so that enables them to work in an environment that is the most productive for them. So I think for me, some of those changes, some of those differences are things that I would like to see as sustained outcomes, because I think it's really important that, work works for other people as well.
That's interesting, actually, because in the higher education sector that I do most of my work in, there's some research, emergent research that started to come through the pandemic that is showing that there's a closing of an attainment gap between different learned demographics from the pandemic. I think talking to some of those points of how technology and the way we've communicated has actually been an enabler for some. To work around different kind of schedules and things like that. And we're going to look at the flip side of that, I know, as we go through. But yeah, Katuta, how about yourself? What kind of skills and things have you noticed? What kind of gaps or opportunities?
Yeah. The biggest change that I've seen is the technology, just how much the technology has accelerated to help this shift from one day working in the office to another day working from home, and also in terms of sharing documents. And one of the things that we've had to do a lot as individuals separately is also learn to use the tools. That has been the biggest change that I've seen. And also in terms of companies being able to quickly cope with the change, because most companies we all didn't have a choice. We had to adapt.
Yeah. No, thanks. And I think as we move on then now to think a little bit more about drilling into those kind of skills and those initiatives for managing change. We know we're in a world now where there's an articulated need for kind of highly knowledgeable and competent citizens who are going to be able to kind of solve these problems that we encounter. However, the future will need people who can not only answer the questions, but are also able to ask the right questions as well. So we're going to look a little bit at that relationship between knowledge, skills, and mindsets, and what that needs to look like in the workplace. So we're in this kind of post-disciplinary society where there's a real focus now on skills. As we know, some of those kind of, if you like, some of those hard skills are going to change and are changing. And actually, we're looking at those kind of human skills. So as we move to this kind of world where there perhaps is a more focus on those human skills about how we communicate, how we learn those tools, perhaps how we collaborate in this new way, what does the education system need to look like to kind of solve that? And perhaps this could talk to some of the work that you guys are doing. Who would like to answer that first? What the education system needs to look like to support and embody some of these skills. Go on, Letitia.
I'm quite happy. Yeah, I'm quite happy to lead that since no one else is rushing to to do so.
It's a big question.
Yeah, it's a big question, absolutely. So as part of the work that I do for my organization, my social enterprise, Build, Scale, Grow, we also work with young people. So we've been working with young people for about 2 years now, running summer programs, holiday programs, and really giving them extracurricular activities that they wouldn't normally get from, the curriculum. So we do things like building robots, thinking about how you would become an astronaut, how to start your own cryptocurrency, etc. And really our ethos is about, interdisciplinary education. So bringing all of the subjects together and helping them to understand that, your destination doesn't necessarily have to have a label like, a scientist or only a scientist. You can be a scientist who has an invention, who can create a business out of that, invention. So, in order to be able to become, the next Mark Zuckerberg, so on and so forth, you think about what your destination is, and then think about the skills that you need to get there. So, if you want to develop a cryptocurrency, your own cryptocurrency firm, what you're thinking about there is, maths, you're thinking about English, financial instruments, engineering in terms of software development, etc. And when we have those discussions with those young people, all of a sudden, the things that they're learning in school, it all comes together. So maths isn't just, maths, and science isn't just science. It's actually all related. And you can do something exciting with your career about it. So I think in terms of where education needs to go next, is really bringing these subjects together in an interdisciplinary way, so that children understand that I'm not learning, this abstract thing that's, separate and disparate from that. They're actually all combined, and, this is where it will take me in terms of my destination.
Yes, thank you. And Katuta, do you want to come in there?
Yeah, very similar to Letitia. I'm part of a group called Airbus Africa Community. This is a voluntary group within Airbus. What we're trying to do is bridge the gap between industry and the schools. This started as a result of a discussion between my sister, who's a teacher in my hometown. She's been a teacher for a while. And one of the things that she was telling me was that whilst the children are able to learn very well from the books in the classroom, the school is very good, they're missing that connection to the industry. And also looking at my own career journey, because unknown to me, my career journey was being used as a story to explain to the children how they could become engineers. I was born in Kalulushi, and at the age of 16, I was awarded a scholarship to come to the UK to study engineering. So my sister invited me back to the school to go and, tell the children what they could do or what the journey was like. And one of the questions I was getting from the children is, what sort of subjects do you need to learn? What sort of things do you do? There was that relationship missing from what they were doing in the classroom to what they potentially could do in the future. Yeah.
No, thank you. So what I'm picking up from both what you've said there is that interdisciplinary of kind of teaching subjects within subjects and mixing those together. There's also that applied nature, isn't there, of how we deliver subjects. We can build that intrinsic motivation around their subjects. Why is it worth learning kind of algebraic equations? How does that maybe apply to your goal of working blockchain? And then that role of industry in education as well. And it's something that, my company works quite hard on as well, is actually how can we support education in that way? And then also, you've just mentioned about the importance of role modeling as well, I think, as being a key thing that students, as they have like living examples of how, kind of skills, the kind of jobs that people can be doing. And Jose, have you got anything to add to that at all?
Yeah, yeah, I do agree with Letitia and with Katuta in terms of the multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary approach to education. But while working in Latin America, one of the things that we need to realize is one thing is to establish the education program that we need, that we want for the country, increasing digital skills into the curriculum. But the other thing is, how are we going to implement it? And in that sense, that becomes very, very difficult. So when I'm talking to government, I'm going to say, you need to segment this program. It's not the same to go to an urban center and say, we are going to do interdisciplinary skills. We are going to be teaching math, science. We are going to make sure that they understand history, that they understand the importance of social sciences and humanities. And then I go to another part of the country or even in the same city, they don't have the resources, they don't have electricity, the civil infrastructure basically doesn't work. So when we are looking towards how are we going to teach all these little kids or adults, we need to make sure that local information is important. It's like, what do I get? It's not always going from the main capital city to all the different regions of the country. It's how much information I can get locally. And this is something that we learned from COVID, because when we were looking into how are we going to be reacting to COVID, I was in the task force for telecom for the OAS, and the first thing that we realized is all these numbers that we got for the last 2-3 decades, completely useless. Yes, we know how many computers do we have, but we don't know where they are. So well, that's one thing, is like make sure that you are tailoring your education strategy according to the different region. And then we need to have be conscious of what are the local tradition, the local culture, because we have multinational countries in Latin America. We have Colombia, we have Brazil, Mexico, Guatemala, Ecuador, and it's very important that education is given in their language. And they understand that that language comes with a history that they are proud of and is very, very important to them. So they need to feel integrated as well. If we are going to empower those little children, we need to make sure that they understand your first language is Quechua, is Nahuatl, is Maya. It doesn't matter. You are as important as someone from the capital city that speaks Portuguese, that speaks Spanish, French, English, Dutch, whatever. That's one thing. The other thing that we are looking into in the region is basically make sure that all the new education programs or material is gender conscious. So they understand that we need to empower women. And you go throughout Latin America, and I'm very happy to see that new organization to empower digital skill on focusing on young women or elderly women are popping up in every single country. And this is not something new. It's like I'm working with Equal that does this on a global basis to make sure that when we go to a country and they say, you cannot be an engineer because you are a girl. You cannot be a doctor. You cannot be a scientist. We show them that that is not true, and we empower them, and we are making sure that when the material is given to them, all the role models that are included in that material include women as well, because women from all ethnic background. And that's something that is very, very important when we are looking into this interdisciplinary approach, especially in a moment when we have so much pressure from companies to say, okay, I don't care about humanities, I don't care about social skills. My company does this. I want an employee that knows how to do this, this, and this. And that's something that we need to be very cautious about and very concerned about. It's like, how can we translate and communicate to this policy decision making in education that not always are the educational experts, the importance of social science, the importance of humanities for every single human being.
No, thank you, Jose. And a key point I take from there as well is this idea that when we're developing education, we're viewing our learners as partners in the experience, which means we consider their context, their situations, and what they need, whether that's localization. And actually, I think quite often we still think about education as this kind of broadcast methodology of kind of we're going to broadcast learning to people, whereas I think what you're saying there is we need to partner with learners, and we need to partner with people where they are in their context to ensure that it really fits with them. And I think just following that, Letitia, we've had a question in, I think about the role of interdisciplinary approach, and I think a lot of people, that challenge with a lot of people. How, given the work that you do, how would you advise schools and people manage to embed that within their curriculum? And I think we could bring in some of the concepts there that Jose brought in around localization, around personalization as well. How would you see that happening?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, and actually it's something that I want to focus on for my master's in social innovation. My topic is obviously education, but some of the experience that I've had trying to work with schools is that obviously they have a mandated curriculum. And so, the workshops that we do are seen as an extracurricular activity. I think education in itself needs to be disrupted from the curriculum point of view and to that question, because from my experience working in industry, we and I recruited a number of graduates, we're getting graduates that are coming out of the school system and they don't have the experience, to step straight into industry. There's quite a lot of training that needs to be done in order to bring them, up to speed. So I think the education system has to look at and work with industry in terms of what are the core skills that people need in order to, either work in industry or, so that we create the next batch of entrepreneurs, that will employ other people. So it's not something that can be done on its own. I think the educational institutions have to work with industry and really think about, how they can bring in other methods of learning. So for example, the science experiments that we do at school are perfect in a science format, but what about other formats? What about other subjects where you bring things to life? So what I'm trying to say is that we have to bring the curriculum to life and bring in real life examples that demonstrate why a subject is important, because it's that side of things, it's that experiential side of things that are missing from the curriculum.
Yeah, thank you for that. And Katuta, with your work as well, do you see some of that? I mean, some of the work you're doing, I think, is trying to add that in, isn't it, into the curriculum? I mean,
yes, I fully agree with Letitia. With what Letitia is saying, there seems to be a gap between schools and industry, and bridging that gap is very important. The other thing is that some of the jobs in future, we don't know what some of the jobs will be like. So we can't prepare children for a specific job. We've got to do something different. For example, in time, there might be a weekend in space, people to arrange that form of transport, for example. So I think in terms of how we prepare children for future roles, it will have to be completely different. It would be more in terms of how they collaborate, the creativity, the communication, those types of skills will be very, very important.
Yeah, and I think on that, I'm getting some feedback there. I think on that as well, this is something, again, that the work of my company at Adobe, we do, looking at how we develop those 5 C's of the communication, creativity, critical thinking, collaboration, and creative problem solving. And I think it seems to be something that persists as a kind of human skills we're going to need as we move forward. So I'm just going to change gears a little bit and talk a little bit more now about the role of digital technology, both as an enabler to this, but also perhaps as an obstacle. And so I guess the question here is, what do you think? Do you think we're starting to see the promise of technology to help deliver some of the things that we're talking about here? And what kind of issues are we seeing with that? Jose, could I come to you perhaps on that one?
Yeah, as I mentioned before, is that there's a better understanding of the impact of digital technology for almost everything that we do, especially in education. However, we need to look into the asymmetries that we have in every single country, not only Latin America and the Caribbean, but in the whole planet, because we are always hearing and listening to this new normal, which is basically not a new normal because not everybody shares the same experience. If we are looking into Latin America, in urban areas, we have the informal economy ranges anywhere from 40% to 75% of the employment force. If we go to the rural area, those numbers go over 90% as well. So how are we going to be looking into a new normal? There's is not a coincidence that when the pandemic hit, the only country that could maintain online education services was Uruguay. It was the only country that established and implemented the one laptop per child initiative, but with software, with training to the teachers, because we are talking about what we need to provide in terms of new skills, in terms of new curriculum with children, but we are not talking that we first need to train the teachers that are not getting that training. And this is one of the main criticisms that we see all over the region. The other issue is the importance and relevance of infrastructure and what type of infrastructure we have, and once we have that infrastructure, what kind of devices do we have to make sure that the children can connect or the people can connect? I was doing a review in terms of, for example, in Colombia, about mobile broadband, which is had kind of ubiquitous reach for over 90% of the population. When we went, when I started digging into see how many people could actually connect to that, it was only 44% of the population. So we do have the coverage, but we don't have the tools to make sure that we connect to it. And that comes into income disparity, that comes into, okay, I'm going to have coverage, but the first point of sale for that coverage is going to be like 100 kilometers for where you live, because I'm not going to put a store or sell anything there because no one is going to buy it. And that's why we have like children in the new normal in Colombia and in many other countries in the region studying via WhatsApp, basically sending or text message, having the teacher going, printing out paper, leaving it at the school so everybody could get the package and then start sending and responding to questions via SMS. That's the reality that we have when it comes to digital skills, because we always are talking about, okay, online learning is the future. Yeah, it's actually the present, but it's not symmetric. And new effort need to be undertaken to make sure that investments go to the where they are needed. And if we are looking into the region, there are countries that have universal funds to do this. Brazil have billions of dollars in fund. Argentina is working towards that, but the reality is we don't have the public policy commitment in many of these countries to do this, because okay, I will give them a computer because I can take a picture. Clientelism, populism, corruption do still play a role when we are looking into the next step that are going to be taken to make sure that everybody get digital skills, that everybody get connectivity, that everybody understand that that national curriculum that needs to be implemented in their schools actually gets implemented. But reality is we are only seeing all these changes mostly in urban areas.
Well, thank you for that. And Katuta, what about your experiences as well? You're talking about the access to digital technology. It's obviously you've been working with the school back in your hometown. Has that been an issue there, or
Yeah, it's one of the biggest challenges that we've found. Both the access to PCs, because most of the time you find that most of the children don't have PCs at home, and the ones that are in school are old or shared amongst several pupils. But even then, they don't have access to Wi-Fi, for example, because it's very, very expensive. So that is yeah, the challenge.
Okay, and then how's that challenge normally overcome?
Well, it's one of the things we're looking at, and also I know that internally in Airbus, there are projects that are looking at connecting several schools in the world. For example, there's a company called OneWeb, which is trying to connect schools, hospitals in the world. So yes, in time, there might be a solution for that. In actual fact, they've already started deploying space satellites for this. In terms of PCs and what we do between now and then, we're actively looking into a possible solution. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And Letitia, we talked earlier on about the affordances of digital technology, remote working, and access to kit and to space. I mean, what have you seen the flip side of that as well with the students you work with? Perhaps a shortage of physical space to work remotely or anything like that, or?
Yes, and very much to both Katuta and Jose's points about inclusion. I think that's essentially what, we're talking about, economic inclusion, and, those who are on the lower socioeconomic spectrum don't necessarily have access, to a digital world. And Jose has reflected about South America and Central America, and Katuta about Zambia and Southern Africa, but that problem also exists in the UK because we do still have quite a wide gap between people who are affluent and people who have abject poverty. So the experience that I had with the children over the last 2 years since 2020 is that sometimes they don't have things like a stable Wi-Fi at home. They don't necessarily have a laptop of their own, and they're working on phones as well. So that problem persists, and as much as we want to think that digital is the future, and it's really going to create a lot of advancements, it absolutely will do. But without addressing those socioeconomic issues, we run the risk of actually widening the gap of people who can access digital and those who can't, and therefore can still be left behind. So I think that's something that's really important that we should have on our radar as well.
Okay, no, thank you. And so we're getting some comments coming in from the chat, and it's interesting because we've obviously been talking about the role of communication all being digital. So I'm going to flip that a little bit. What do you see? Do you still see a role for face-to-face communication in education, or have we now pivoted to? Is it a nice luxury to have face-to-face, or is it a kind of, or do we need to be trying to build that back in? Jose, did you want to come in on that, or did you want to come in on another point? Sorry.
No, I just wanted to complement what Letitia mentioned, is that when we are looking into the digital technologies and education, we're always looking into, mostly people always think about the computer, the laptop, the mobile phone, but that's just the tool to connect. We need to start thinking more and more about the software, the applications that we need to have, because I can give computers to everybody, but if you don't have that digital educational software, it's going to be pretty much useless. Contrary to what Negroponte said, that you just give a computer to a kid and suddenly he become an engineer because he'll figure out how to use it and what to do with it. No, it's not. It doesn't work like that. The empirical evidence that we have doesn't show that. You need to have that software support, those applications, and educational application that are tailored for the age, the gender, the cultural background, and for the children, but also for the teachers that are going to be delivering the material. And I cannot stress enough the importance of providing education to the teachers, on digital skills, because let's face it, when we're looking into rural areas in the developing world, sometimes it's a person that has been there for 20, 30 years with no resources. Suddenly you give them everybody a tablet. He might be trying to figure out how to do something. The little kid for 6 years old, like turn it on, does this, this is how you turn it on. Those computers are, those tablets are going to be in a box somewhere else, because he's not going to feel very empowered. He's going to be threatened by that little kid. So we need to make sure that he understands that this is not a competitor. That tablet and that digital software is not a competitor. He's not going to be replaced by them. They are going to complement his label. He's going to make it easier, and they are going to provide him with more resources to do his job. And that's something that we are still struggling in the region. And I see it almost on a weekly basis, that it doesn't matter what you tell them, they just prefer to do it the old way.
I think we see this across the whole education landscape, that the key to kind of education innovation and an implementation of new learning modalities actually comes down to training teachers and faculty in using these tools so they feel confident to use them. Because we've had a question around what kind of features should platforms be having to help teaching and communicating, and I think you've kind of answered some of those there, Jose. And I think the key thing here seems to be the human factor, doesn't it? Is actually how do we actually enable people to feel confident with those skills? And I think there's a comment further down again from Navina talking, that you actually need to enable people to make mistakes. It helps them grow. We need to let them collaborate together on group projects, and that will build resilience, and that will build kind of experience through that. So we're coming in, we're fast, this has gone very fast, but we're coming into the last part really. So the kind of the closing questions each of you that I'd like to think about is, the title of this session is, what do you want to be when you grow up? But we've I think very quickly realized that that's probably not the right question. So what do you think the question is that we should be asking instead of what do you want to be when you grow up? Katuta, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I think one of the questions, well, first of all, maybe what we should be doing is exposing children to as much as possible as they are growing up, then finding out what interests them. Another interesting question would be, how would they like to serve their local communities? Another thing we're doing, or we were doing as part of the pilot that we've been running in Zambia, is actually getting the children involved in local projects where you don't have PCs. There's still local projects that they can get involved in. So they choose what they want to do in partnerships with the local businesses, and also alumni, people who've been at a school, they've left working in local businesses. So getting that partnership, and then later on finding out what the children are interested in.
Okay, thank you. And Jose, how about yourself?
I'm going to rephrase what Katuta said, because I'm very into Jamie Kasab, the Google guy, that said we don't need to ask what are you going to be when you grow up, but what problems do you want to solve when you grow up? So basically, I'm in the same line. That's what we should be asking instead. But as I mentioned, this is Jamie Kasab from Google, and then we have Adam Grant from Wharton School explaining why this is important. But I will go over on those lines.
Okay, thank you. And Letitia?
So what we've been asking the children that we work with is, instead of what do you want to be, is where do you see yourself in the future? And some of those, answers are really, really interesting, and it helps us as adults to really think about what that means. So some of the answers we get is things like, I want to start my own electric vehicle company. So as instructors, it helps us to think about, this person is interested in engineering and business and actually solving problems, much to what Jose said as well. And a lot of the problems that exist in their local community and also in a wider context as well. So by asking them that, it really shows to me, for example, from my first-hand experience, how tuned in children are with what's going on in the world and what problems exist in the world and how they can serve their communities, very much to what Katuta said as well. And also that future question, really gets them thinking about what that future looks like and, getting them to talk about what that future looks like from their point of view as well. So I think asking questions like that is really exciting, because as adults, we can also learn from their answer about what they are seeing and thinking about as well.
Thank you for that answer. No, thank you, guys. And I think, I'm just stepping back a little bit here. I'm someone who never feels like I've really grown up. And so I feel like we always need to be asking ourselves these questions, don't we? What's the change we want to make? What's the kind of impact we want to have? And what do we want to do? And how do we want to have a positive influence on the world, really, in the way that you guys are? And so I just want to thank you all for your time today to join this panel. I'm afraid we've run out of time, but we're going to continue the conversation at future Shape Education events, but also now on LinkedIn as well, with some discussion questions and things that we put up there. We're running regular events like this, so please keep an eye on shapeeducation.org for next month's event, and also get in touch with us and let us know what topics you'd like to cover in the future. I'd like to thank again the panelists for joining us today, and thank you so much for joining the session and for feeding it into the chat as well. And I wish you all a great rest of the day. Bye.